Hey Suzanne, how are you and how's going everything at your side?
Everything's great. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks for asking. So tell me that how's going your day today?
It's terrific. I've got a long day ahead, various meetings, but it's a really pleasure to begin this morning
Hmm.
with you.
Thank you so very much for that. And one thing I must appreciate your background. Is it the real background or are you using a Zoom background there? Because you've got
No,
a lot of books there.
this is the real background, and this
Uh,
is this is where I teach and do other things if I'm doing it on Zoom.
that's great because on my background I can see very few of the books. Might be this is because of the age gap. The moment you move on further towards your age, so you get more and more books. Might be that is why like the difference is clearly there.
It could be, it could also be my field. So I'm an art and architectural historian,
Hmm.
and you need the imagery in the books and you need to
Hmm.
have them accessible. So there could be worse addictions, there could be
Hmm.
worse professions, but they're part of what I do.
Yeah. So tell us a bit, what exactly do you do about your experience and all?
So I'm an art and architectural historian,
Hmm.
and I teach at Harvard University, and my field is African and to a lesser extent African American art and architecture and visual culture. But I do most of my work in Africa and addressing both art, meaning
Hmm.
sculpture, etc., and architecture.
Hmm. So how did it all start? Was it really your interest or it just happened to you?
A combination of the two of them. After
Hmm.
my freshman year of university, I was working in Washington, D.C. in the U.S. Senate.
Hmm.
And it was one of those really rough summers, a
Hmm.
lot of protests, a lot of tear gas. And that was the summer that Bobby Kennedy was killed.
Hmm.
And that had, he was the third really major
Hmm.
political death in this country, and it had a major impact on me. And I was interested in art history. It's somehow seeing art as a lens through which you can understand the world,
Hmm.
uh, historically and in other places, was deeply important to me.
Hmm.
And I went back home to start my next year of classes, and thought at the time that I could not really do things that I wanted to be of value, to be of service in that
Hmm.
field. And so quit school and went to Africa in the Peace Corps. And
Hmm.
Africa really transformed me. It's a continent that is extraordinary, and the place where I was extraordinary. And it really led to the career, because at that time, most everything written on African art and architecture
Hmm.
was pejorative. It was
Hmm.
highly negative. And I just felt that there was a role for me in trying to change that.
Hmm. Yeah. So how did you find it out? Like earlier, it was your interest, it happened to you, and after that, you were teaching it to the student too, and you were, in fact, transforming that interest to the millions of people out there who were your student, in fact. So how did you feel that? Earlier, it was your interest, and then you were teaching it. Was it similar when you were teaching it, then to your interest, or was it totally a different experience when it comes to delivering it to the other people?
No, they're co-joined, and I would add to that. I write a lot of
Hmm.
books and other kinds of things, and they're all intermeshed. I don't
Hmm.
necessarily begin that way, but as I look back, I reflect on it. It's part of this broader mission to have a deeper understanding and convey to others in a language that they're going to understand the
Hmm.
rich history and complexity of these art forms.
Hmm. So, is it like something which was happening to you all the time, or I mean, were there some specific time when you lost your interest? So, was it the continuous interest in the same field, or did you ever find it out like it's the history because people usually find it boring? So, did that happen to you as well, or not?
No, I see so many challenges, and my real problem is the limitation we all have on 24-hour days.
Hmm.
I just love it. I mean, there are ways in which it's been enriched and complicated over time. More recently, the last 5 or 6 years, I've become really immersed also in the local culture where I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it began through an interest in architectural preservation, which is part of what I am interested in, and then became active locally, and then have started teaching a class on the history of Cambridge, Massachusetts, from our indigenous beginnings to today, and thinking about climate and the environment. And then from that grew a book that I'm publishing later this year on, it's called Streets of Newtown. And the original Anglo name for Cambridge was Newtown. And I'm telling the story from the experience of the streets and the past, who are seeing all of these changes over the history of place. So in a way, it is also, of interest politically in terms of how people fashion where they live. And I'm trying to encourage students in that class to really look closely at where they're actually living, and if to encourage them to take part in it, because if we as individuals don't become active in the landscapes in which we are living, then it's other more powerful, more well-funded entities that will in fact determine the future of one's place. So that's also, I mean, it's grounded, it's historical, it's engaging architecture and other forms. I hired an artist to work through the images sort of in each of the periods that I'm discussing. So it fits in with that, but it also fits in with, I think, a larger commitment for service. I think that really is a driver of what I do.
Great. So the way you were saying that wherever we are living, it doesn't matter which country, which city, so you have to understand your place. Is this only for the students who are studying architecture, textural, or might be the history, or is it for everybody? And how a common person can actually participate in this thing?
So in my teaching, I have all students, of various backgrounds. I've got probably half the class are economic students, economic majors. But the book I wrote really is for everybody. It's told from the vantage point of young adults who are reading it presumably with their parents or teachers or librarians, because I want them to get a sense of the feel of the place and understanding. We have a very rich, very diverse, very complex history. I'm addressing some tough subjects in it, such as Cambridge's role in the slave trade, for example, or the way that we completely disenfranchised our indigenous original landholders. And I'm working with the local population here and seeing if we can find a way to give them political credit for the fact that they are the original landholders. My university was founded as a teaching institution for indigenous peoples. And so seeing how I can help to address that, because I think in every area, we have autochthonous populations that are often kind of pushed to the side. And I would say if I have a focal point, a sort of deep-seated interest, it's in helping to find and give voice to those populations.
Great. So would you tell me a bit about the book that you have written, and what are the key factors mentioned over there, which is going to help everybody from every field?
Well, I've written a number of books, and I was just immensely fortunate. I received a chieftaincy in Nigeria from a Yoruba king, and it was an enormous honor, and also it gave me a real commitment also of service, right? That kind of engagement. And that in part came because I wrote a book about the 1300s and a really brilliant local king and an amazing patron of the arts who created a corpus of works in this Yoruba part of Nigeria that came in the aftermath of a whole period of political violence, of civil war, of flooding. And he chose to honor both those who were defeated, the leaders of those families, and those who were victors with these amazing artwork. So as we think about going forward, and we think about, I think wars will always be with us, but we have to find ways to bring people together, even in the aftermath of that, by and providing a political system in which all of these voices can have a role. And the particular king who bestowed that honor on me is Muslim, but he also, as a king, is a god himself, is how it's considered locally. And he and other kings really celebrate the religious traditions of multiple groups within Nigeria and outside, Christianity, Islam, and the various deities that are part of this tradition.
Great. So who has been your influencer? Who has influenced the most? I mean, you have written the books, you have studied the history of different cultures and the religions and a lot of other things. So who has influenced you the most?
Going back early, maybe I was 12 or 13 years old, and I found the diary of a great-great-grandfather of mine who began as a minister and then traveled south just prior to the American Civil War. And he had a revelation that he was going to get up every morning, like at 4 o'clock, and hour by hour, learn something, philosophy, languages, various things. And by the end of his life, he knew 8 or 9 languages. He was actually, he became briefly a professor here, and then left to go to Oberlin, which is a really fine university in the Midwest, and then came back. And he was trying to co-join, this was a hard moment, which is similar to what we have today, co-join religion and science, and saying they don't have to be polar opposites. It was then the beginning era of evolution, that that these are part of the same cloth, the whole cloth. And I made the mistake of thinking, wow, this is what I want to do. I'm not going to do any more homework in school. I'm simply going to read every book in the library, and started on that path. I think I got to the letter T. I barely made it through high school. Somehow I got into college, and then I developed the ability to actually sit and do homework assignments and not just read, but drawing on that legacy. I'm pretty undaunted in terms of what kinds of materials I look at, what kinds of theories I address. They're all together into this cloth. I would say that's number one early on, and I still go back to it. And I would say the other thing is objects and ideas and buildings that inspire me, because they're anomalies, right? And to me, it's the anomalies that really make for this kind of complexity.
Right. All right. So how do you see the future of this field, the future of history in the world?
The future of I think we have to come back to it. I think I can't speak for the world at large. I can speak for my area, my country, my sphere of influence. I think we have to be bolder in addressing what the real history is. I'm interested at the moment in the possible medieval links, for example, between the Yoruba society in Nigeria and Freemasonry. You know, this is before the Black Death, an enormous period of international travel and commerce. Indian and other materials arriving in the middle of Nigeria through an east-west route. We're talking cowrie shells, we're talking textiles, and the Black Death really, because so many people died, particularly along the major trade routes, it took 100 years to come back. But I think addressing historically how important this international engagement was, I just think we have to be bolder. I think we have to try to redress some of the fictions, the lack of facts, and we have to try to move certainly our society to be thinking more than just personal profit. You know, we have to be thinking about the legacy that we each leave to the next generation, whether we're talking about the environment, whether we're talking about history, whether we're talking about the engagement of the fuller range of individuals and traditions that we are part of.
Great. Well, Suzanne, one last question. the great statement that you have just said, that we have to get out of the personal interest and the personal benefit. So how can we convert this my benefit to our benefit mindset?
That's that's a really great question and a tough question.
Mm,
I don't know. I think it's one by one. I
mm,
think I believe in really fostering this kind of idea, working one-on-one with students, with individuals.
mm,
You know, in my writing, I really try to keep it to a level that's going to engage everyone. I
mm,
think we have to start with early education. You know, I
mm,
think we've got to start that process early. And I think working together, I mean, there's a great theory that can be positive and negative by Emil Durkheim on gangs, in
mm,
which he's talking about one individual believes one thing, but once by the time you get 7 or 8 people together, then you've got a gang, and they can change things for the good or the bad,
mm,
right? You know, if you've got a group, and here it's sometimes gendered, and particularly on the web with social media, you know, the attacks and the vile kind of things that are happening, where you can take that same force of
mm,
multiple people coming together to support each other, women's voices, men and women's voices, various voices coming together. And I think that harnessing that first at the local and individual level, and then on a broader scale, is what ultimately will change things.
great. Well, Suzanne, you are really a person that everybody would love listen to, and for a very long, long time, you know. But this is the end of this session right now. It was really lovely talking to you. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope every single person who is listening to this conversation, who is watching this video, really gonna learn a lot and will enjoy the conversation.
Thank you so much, and terrific questions. It's a real pleasure and honor to meet you.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you so very much. Take care. Stay blessed. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.